But you know, this could be a part of a bigger plan. Let's begin. It's almost as if they're trying to push us into the loving arms of electric vehicles, or EVs, isn't it? I mean, but who can afford them anyway, especially during an epic cost of living crisis? But according to the RAC, drivers had the pleasure of experiencing one of the most jaw-dropping monthly fuel price hikes over the last 2 decades in August, a staggering 7 pence per litre for petrol and 8 pence per litre for diesel. And if you ask me, it's kind of like the price at the pump played a little game of how high can we go? But of course, let's just put this into perspective a bit, because this fuel price surge ranks at the 5th highest monthly increase in petrol prices in the last 23 years, and the diesel price hike, well, that's apparently the 6th largest over the same period. It's kind of like a leaderboard of outrageous price increases, isn't it? And unfortunately, we're the unwilling participants in it all. But what's their excuse this time? Well, apparently the cost of oil decided to have its own little rollercoaster ride, skyrocketing to nearly $12 a barrel since July. So we can all thank OPEC for that, and their decision, of course, to reduce supply sent shockwaves through the oil market, causing this wholesale cost of fuel to do somersaults. And guess who's paying the bill? That's right, it's us at the forecourts. But don't worry, because Simon Williams, the REC Fuel spokesperson, mentioned that it could all have been even worse if the bigger retailers didn't graciously return their inflated profit margins to more normal levels as wholesale fuel costs went up. Well, aren't they just the heroes of our wallets, eh? Because to me, in the first place, they shouldn't have even increased their profit margins. They should have kept them the same, and then we could have all saved much more, couldn't we? But anyway, the article says that drivers were hit with one of the biggest monthly fuel price rises in more than 2 decades in August, new figures show. The RAC said 7 pence per litre spike in the average cost of petrol in August was the 5th largest monthly increase in 23 years. The 8p per mile hike in diesel prices was the 6th largest over the same period. The RAC though said that rising pump prices are being caused by an increase in the cost of oil, which has gone up by nearly $12 a barrel since the start of July to nearly $87 due to OPEC reducing supply. This led to wholesale cost of fuel, which retailers pay, going up, which has since, of course, been passed on to us, the customers. RAC Fuel spokesperson, though, Simon Williams, said August was the biggest shock to drivers as they had grown used to seeing far lower fuel prices to last summer's record highs. Seeing £4 or more go onto the cost of a tank of fuel in just a space of a few weeks from a pump rise of 6 or 7 per litre is galling, particularly for those who drive lots of miles or run an older, less fuel-efficient car. While the increase is clearly bad news for drivers, it could have been far worse had the biggest retailers not let their inflated profit margins from earlier in the year return to more normal levels as wholesale fuel costs went up. Well, maybe, just maybe, Rishi Sunak might actually be listening to us a bit, because if this so-called small boots law is enacted, it could put a stopper on billions of pounds in foreign aid funding that has been used to cover the ballooning costs of so-called asylum seekers. But there's just one problem: it might go on something else instead. But I'll get onto that in a minute. The Independent Commission for Aid Act, the ICA, has thrown its hat into the ring, claiming, of course, that the Illegal Migration Act could effectively slam the door on the primary source of funding for accommodating newcomers. A staggering £3.7 billion of the official development assistance, the ODA, budget vanished into thin air last year and was mostly gobbled up by hotel bills. But here's where it gets a little bit tangled. Because you see, the OECD, of which the UK is a card-carrying member, has its own set of quirky rules. It says that aid funds can only be spent on Indo and refugee costs if these individuals are waiting a decision on their asylum claims, which seems kind of logical, doesn't it? But now brace yourselves for the acrobatics, because if those migrants arrive on UK shores from what is deemed unauthorised methods, they are slapped with the label illegal, which is quite right in my opinion, and they are shut out from the asylum club, which is obviously simple. And that also means that the funding tap suddenly dries up for their housing. Perhaps they wouldn't have a problem at all if they just turned them all around and sent them back to a safe country of France. But anyway, so of course, instead of relying on foreign aid to foot the bill for hotel stays, the Home Office might have to dig deep into its own pockets, which I guess still means we'll be paying, but maybe, just maybe, that figure might actually be ballooning to a massive level as we roll out the red carpet, rather than, of course, a diversion sign to anyone who comes over from the sea from the safe country of France. Of course, Labour does like to kick the boot in, doesn't it? And one of its MPs has dubbed this revelation a spectacular own goal for the government. Oh, don't worry about that, because the Home Office assures us that it's diligently assessing the Act's impact on the ODA spending. And they also insist that while we're playing by the OECD's rulebook, it's almost as if they're saying, trust us, we've got this all under control, which is obviously their famous last words usually, isn't it? But at the end of the day, they really do need to stop all this illegal immigration in the first place, don't they? By sending out a message. And that should be something like, a Tony Abbott Australian Prime Minister style message saying, like, if you come over illegally from the safe country of France, you will not get a free ride and then you will get sent back to France. Otherwise, there's just no deterrent, is there? And then hopefully, the message might get about that anyone who does arrive over here illegally from the safe country of France wouldn't actually get a free ride. But there is just one thing with that. The government needs a giant set of balls to actually carry out, which, if I remember rightly, I'm sure they said they'd do a similar thing, but to be honest, we are still waiting, aren't we? But anyway, the article says that Rishi Sunak's flagship small boats law could block millions of pounds of foreign aid funding being used to cover spiralling housing costs for asylum seekers in Britain. The Independence Commission Act impact, the ICA, said that the Illegal Migration Act could close all of its main source of funding for housing arrivals in the UK. Nearly £3.7 billion from the Official Development Assistance, the ODA, budget was diverted last year, which largely went towards paying for hotels. But the report by the watchdog said that this could be prevented if the legislation is fully enacted following legal challenges to the Rwanda policy. This is because the OECD, of which the UK is a member, states that aid funding can only be spent on in-donor refugee costs if individuals are awaiting an asylum decision. And it states that if migrants who arrive by unauthorised means in the UK are deemed illegal and barred from receiving asylum, then aid funding would not be eligible to be used on accommodation pending their removal. Dr. Tamsin Barton, the ICA's Chief Commissioner, said it would mean the Home Office having to meet the cost of its own budget, rather than, of course, the Foreign Aid Office. She said, our analysis of the age rules suggested that the Illegal Migration Act, if fully implemented, could close off the main source of funding the government is using to house asylum seekers. Dr. Barton said that using the aid budget on hotel costs for asylum seekers rather than supporting people in their home countries is inadequate as well as inefficient. And Labour MP Sarah Champion, who chairs the Commons International Development Committee, described the funding as a spectacular own goal for the government. The Home Office said that it's still assessing the Act's impact on the ODA spending, but insisted it acts in accordance with the OECD rules. A government spokesperson as well said it is vital that we deter people from risking their lives in extremely dangerous small boat crossings. The Illegal Migration Act will mean that people who come to the UK illegally will not have the right to stay. Instead, they will be liable to be returned to either their own home country or relocated to a safe third country, breaking the business model of people smugglers and stopping the unprecedented strain on our asylum system. Well, of course, British Gas is back in the spotlight again, and it's not for their delightful customer service or heartwarming energy-saving tips. No, they've hit the jackpot with an astonishing 889% surge in profits. It's kind of like they've stumbled across a money printer machine in their basement, isn't it? But before we accuse them of any daylight robbery at all, the CEO Chris O'Shea wants us to believe that this windfall isn't because they've been emptying our wallets with sky-high bills. No. It's because of some one-off recovery thanks to the price drop mechanism and those pesky wholesale energy costs following Russia's attempted takeover, which, I don't know about you, kind of seems to be the excuse for everything nowadays, doesn't it? I mean, who knew an international crisis could be so profitable, eh? But while British Gas is doing the money dance, charities and customer groups are sounding the alarm. And that is because apparently around 4,700 people in Britain shivered their way through the winter last year due to unaffordable heating. But I guess British Gas don't care about that, do they? Hopefully I am wrong about that, though. But don't worry about that, because Chris O'Shea has an answer to those critics. He says that a generous 10% of British Gas profits have been donated to help the vulnerable and small businesses. It's kind of like offering a tiny umbrella to someone caught in a hailstorm, a gesture that barely covers a downpour. Meanwhile, though, these customer advocates are promising practical solutions like providing direct support for struggling families through their energy bills and creating a priority support channel to deal with urgent cases more efficiently. It's almost as if they're kind of expecting energy companies to, assist people who keep their lights on, but surely that's just crazy talk, isn't it? It's like asking a restaurant to serve food instead of charging you for reading the menu. I mean, who would do such a thing, eh? The energy regulator thinks that this would be helpful if the government reinstated. Apparently, they finally realised that persistently high bills, might actually push customers' households into financial hardship. It's like someone shouting from the rooftops, maybe we should put that fire out before the buildings burn down. And actually, in my opinion, they should have been given extra support or discounts to their customers rather than just raking in presumably sky-high profits. And if they did that, who knows, they might have gained more customers that way as well. Household energy support, which they fully withdrew in July. Anyway, the article says that the boss of the UK's largest household energy supplier has been forced to defend record profits amid warnings of worse times ahead for household bills this winter. In evidence to the Energy Security Net Zero Committee of MPs, the chief executive of British Gas parent firm Centrica, Chris O'Shea, insisted, that the 889% surge in profits for the first half of this year were not a consequence of withheld bills. Oh, of course not, eh? He explained that it reflected a one-off recovery under the price cap mechanism of additional wholesale energy costs that the company had been forced to pay in the wake of the Ukraine invasion when prices hit unprecedented levels. The committee, though, had earlier learnt from a string of charities and consumer interest groups, with one pointing out that 4,700 people in Britain dying last winter from the effects and lack of household heating. Simon Francis, coordinator at the End Fuel Prophecy Coalition, backed assertions that millions of households face a tougher winter than last given how many people were laden with debt. Asked how he could sleep at night because people are dying, Mr O'Shea said 10% of British Gas profits had been voluntarily given to help vulnerable customers and small firms. Well, isn't that a lot out of the 889% surge in profits, I'm guessing? A measly 10%. How about an extra 25 or maybe even 50% as you weren't expecting to get that money, eh? What about that? Well, I'm guessing they weren't expecting to get that money anyway, but those representing customers recommend direct early support for vulnerable families through their energy bills, given the continuing and evolving challenges posed by the wider cost of living crisis. One suggested a priority support channel could be opened with suppliers so they can handle urgent cases in a more timely manner, given frustrations over call waiting times. The energy regulator told Sky News that last month it would have been helpful if the government brought back the household energy support fully withdrawn in July due to persistently higher bills that risked plunging more households into the debt. And if you think that's bad, then wait until you see this video.